Hello, everyone, and welcome to Collapse Club, where our topic is, how are we to live in the time of collapse? I am here with Stuart Smith from Tuscany, Italy. Hello, Stuart.
Hi, David. To be technically correct, I'm from Birmingham, England, but calling in from Tuscany, Italy, my home of 8.5 years now.
And therein lies a story.
There is.
Why did you move from England to Tuscany to farm?
It's a multifaceted answer, but let's try and pick out the most appropriate one. We wanted to live a more sustainable lifestyle. In my blissful ignorance, I thought 8-9 years ago I was way ahead of the curve in deciding that I needed to reduce my consumption and just try and tread a little lighter on the surface of this planet we inhabit. Property prices being the way they are in England, it was not something we could afford to do a piece of land in order on which to farm. The costs were just prohibitive. So we combined our love for Italy and Tuscany, a cliche by Tuscany, and found a little patch of land in northern Tuscany with a little house. As many foreigners do, we buy the old stone-built former olive farms. So it's to come and try and tread a little bit lighter on the planet, David, and try and grow a little bit of food, try and heat the house with the firewood that we have available, just live a bit more naturally, like most of our history has been, I guess.
You and I met in the Deep Adaptation Forum and the Facebook group where you are a moderator, and I used to be a moderator. How has deep adaptation played into your life now?
Yeah, still a moderator. I joined just before the pandemic, so it was quite a baptism of fire. It was a bumpy ride initially coming to collapse awareness. I thought I was ahead of the curve when I moved here. I found Jem Bendel's paper on deep adaptation, summer of 2019. And it kind of dragged me back into a bit of a depressive black hole. I've suffered from depression, helpfully. First time in my life, it started 6 months after moving here. It's fairly easily manageable with medication. Realizing I was a long way behind the curve, and not only that, there were some tough times in my future. I had to do a lot of soul searching. It was a wonderful group of moderators and a fantastic set of members in the group. With the help of all the above, I was helped to learn mindfulness, which has become a fantastic tool to help with my depression. And acceptance, I guess. I've started to tippy toe into the world of Buddhism these days, and understanding that this is we're just part of the human story. And my journey is far from done with deep adaptation, and it will keep going for as long as external forces allow. But
let's take a look. Let's take a look at the context in which you are grappling with these problems.
Yes.
I took photographs off your Facebook page that I think will show people the farm where you live.
Okay.
I think that's showing. This is looking up your terraces to the house.
There is the house, indeed. It's an old olive farm of about 500 years. This is one of about 30 terraces in which the house sits in the centre.
This is looking out over the valley, yes?
Correct, to the local village. which is medieval in the distance there.
Isn't that sweet? What is this?
This is looking across the terracing. So we were looking up at that log wall on the left in the first photo there. And you can see you can just about make out the terracing.
And this is what it took to create those terraces. That looks like an enormous amount of work.
Yeah, it was. I still feel it in my hips, my elbows, and my knees at the moment. That was the first lockdown of COVID. You know that we had a lot of spare time on our hands. All the wood was cut from the woodland, bark stripped, posts driven into the ground, and all the logs behind split and put into place.
Just remarkable. And that's what you started with.
That's the same area. That's what we started with. Yes, that's a couple of weeks into it, because it was you couldn't even discern terracing beneath what was there beforehand. The woodland does what it does, and it had taken back over the land.
How many acres or what measurement of land area do you
I can do acres for you, being English. We're about 12 acres.
Oh. Here's the house from the side.
There's the house from the side, undergoing repairs. Where that square, that stone square you see there used to be an old chestnut house attached to the house at that point, which subsequently fell down, which is where they used to dry the chestnuts historically.
Indeed.
It's,
yeah.
IBC tanks, which we installed as a rainwater catchment system. So they collect water in the early part of the year from the roof. There's 6,000 litres in there. So in gallons, I can't do gallons for you, but 6 cubic meters of water.
It's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water. It gets us through to probably midsummer. If irrigation upgrades next year go to plan, then that hopefully much longer.
And this is what you use the water for.
These are what we use the water for. We also use the IBC tanks for growing all the vegetables in there, because we've had much trial and error. And the one things we have become expert in is underestimating the wildlife we share this bit of land with. And we've lost countless vegetables to porcupines, to wild boar, to roe deer, and to voles also. So this became a system to avoid all of those issues, and it works incredibly well. They're essentially hugel culture beds filled with wood in the bottom, topped up with soil and homemade compost.
Here's a tale of tomatoes. These are, how do you measure your tomato crop?
Good question. Every year is different. These are a Datorino tomato, which are a small cherry type tomato, which are for salads and summer eating. The larger tomatoes we use for making what the Italians call passata, which is a tomato sauce which you would use in a pasta sauce or there you go, or for pizza toppings.
That's a lot of tomatoes.
A lot of tomatoes. They all get cooked down, and then you pass them through essentially a sieve with a kind of grinding blade on top, which removes all the skins. And then you can them.
Wow.
Some canned tomatoes.
It's fantastic. You also raise grapes.
We have grapes on the pergolas. We have kiwis. We have, since we've moved here, we planted about 50 fruit and nut trees. Half the olive grove was missing its trees due to some very bad weather in '85. So rather than replant extra olives, as we already have about 100 olive trees, we planted 50 fruit and nuts. So we essentially have an orchard now, which is slowly coming into production.
Such substantial amounts of food. It's really very impressive.
The pictures are very flattering.
And here are your bees.
The bees, yes. They're managed by a friend of ours. He does everything for us. and provides us with a small portion of the harvest. So he essentially uses a small piece of our land. Our valley is very prized for acacia honey and chestnut honey. So one follows the other. They produce the acacia in April, and they harvest the honey from that, and then put new supers on top for the chestnut honey, which follows about 3 weeks later.
And here, tell us what this is.
Shiitake mushrooms we've also started to cultivate. So on the right there, you can see logs that have been inoculated, I think probably about 18 months ahead of time and are ready for fruiting. On the left, freshly inoculated logs, which sit there for about 12 to 18 months until the logs are full of mycelium, in which case, at which point they can be used for fruiting.
And it's moisturized by that tube across the top. Is that for misting?
Yes, exactly. The logs need to stay a little bit humid so that the mycelium doesn't die off throughout the summer. So we run that on a timed setup. It's a bit of technology. We try and go low tech as much as possible, but we find things like this give us extra time to work elsewhere.
And these are just some random beautiful beetroots.
Which you call Tondo di Chioggia. Chioggia is a small town south of Venice. So I guess these beetroots and the seeds and the selection of them were from that area. Wow. I love to grow them because they're just they're a joy to prepare.
Yeah, so pretty. Okay, but recently you've had some fires in the area, and there's been a substantial drought, is my understanding.
Yeah, it's been a rather special year this year. Fires aren't uncommon up to a certain size. This area is famed for its olive oil rather than its grape production. Every year, the olive trees need pruning, and the huge amounts of prunings are generally burnt. There's no way to dispose of them. Quite often, they get out of control with the wind. This year, I still don't know what the cause of this was. So this was in Massa Rosa, which is not too far away. And this was an enormous fire. I forget how many acres. I mean, hundreds, thousands of acres. It was enormous. And it was the only time in the 8 years we've been here that the air was quite so thick with putrid smoke.
And here's a shock. I'm sorry. Here's a shocking photograph. Can you describe what we're looking at?
Yeah, you're looking at the freeway that goes right past that village you were looking at in the previous photo, and you can see those two orange, let's call them eyes. Those are the tunnels that go through the mountainside there. So it was
burning inside the tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. That fire went on for quite a long time, I forget how long before they put that in. We had Canadairs, helicopters flying around for days, picking up seawater, thankfully seawater, which is 50 kilometers, 30 miles away. So.
But now you have recovered and everything is peaceful and gorgeous, yes?
Everything is peaceful and gorgeous. The sunflowers no longer look like this. The birds are feeding on the droopy seed heads right now, but the lawn you see behind is much greener and lusher now. We've finally had some rain. It's been the driest summer in living memory, I think, in this area.
The thing that occurs to me looking at those photographs of your place is the enormous amount of knowledge, skill, practice that you need to absorb to do that. Did you know how to farm before you went to Italy?
No. It would have been helpful had I. We lived in a very standard terraced house in England. Our yard was probably 20 foot by 10, 12 feet. We had a few shrubs and not much space for anything else. My dad had a slightly larger garden when I was a child, and I still remember the smell of tomatoes in his greenhouse. So he had a bit of a green finger, but it was only hobby scale. So we've learned everything the hard way, involving the steep learning curve, David. you know, speaking to people. Once we got a grasp of the language, you can then learn from the locals, because it's still very
You
much a
didn't
farming
speak
community.
Italian when you arrived in Italy?
No, I could speak tourist Italian. We holidayed here a number of times, so you know, you put me near a bar or a restaurant or a hotel, I could get by. But you need a whole different set of vocabulary when your sewer system backs up, or you've got no water, or the internet doesn't work, or you know, you've got something to repair in the house. So it was
Seems
the
like a
problem.
huge leap of, I'm sorry, seems like a huge leap of faith to leave your home in England, go to a place you don't speak the language, to do something you don't know how to do. What made you do something like that?
I think the life I was living back in the UK was, and I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back on it, just went across it was going at 90 degrees. The only thing that was driving my decision in that facet. So, as I said, coming to climate collapse awareness in 2019, 5 years after we moved here, was quite the rug being pulled from beneath me.
Did it change the way you approach your work in the farm?
Yes, yeah, completely. I've become less of a human using this land to try and provide for my needs, and more part of the ecosystem in which I live. One of the things, the important things I learned from deep adaptation was to understand where my agency is and how large my scope of agency is. And having spent so much time on the steep learning curve, learning about the insects, the animals, the soil food web that I need to live in harmony with in order to grow healthy food, I realized my scope of agency is, by and large, it stretches as far as the confines of this little bit of land we own. And on that live countless lives that I can have a positive effect on. You know, we set a lot of space aside for perennials, for flowers. We're constantly thinking about stretching the flowering period for pollinators. So yes, I've gone. Let me say, I've gone from anthropocentric to quite the opposite these days, and I find it brings me gratitude also.
What is the opposite of anthropocentrism?
Now you ask me, I was setting myself up for that.
Yeah.
A more ecocentric, let's call it, a more ecocentric outlook. And I've become fascinated with insects, fascinated by fungi. Every little corner of this 12-acre plot we live on has become, and it's become rather precious because it helps me find my own place on this planet. It makes me feel smaller. It makes me feel less important. It makes me feel I'm trying to grasp for. It's all okay because this is just the way it all works.
I've heard the same story from Jordan Perry and Karen Perry, who also set out to farm a piece of land and came around to the idea that they are simply members of the community of life. And the attitude is quite different, and it's easier on the soul once you give up the striving for a particular result.
Yes. Yes, that's a nice way to put it. Members of the community. Absolutely. Yes, I'm part of a much bigger, much bigger story, you know. I think initially when I came to collapse awareness, I had a real freak out. And it was all about me and what I might lose, how I might maintain some of that. And then that slowly extended out to the people I know and love. And now I'm extending that out to the insects around me and the pollinators and the worms that live in the soil and the soil food web in the compost pile. And, you know, with the understanding, it all feels a little more palatable somehow.
So this is a naive question, and I ask it knowing kind of what I'm thinking about it. But do you think that farming on a small piece of land is a plan to survive the collapse of civilization?
Nope, not even close. Not even close. I've realized we've forgotten so much as a species, David. And you know, I can be as self-sufficient as I like. I doubt I'll even get there. It takes an enormous effort, but that amounts to nothing if all of my neighbours aren't doing the same. You know,
What is the attitude of your neighbors?
I am yet to find anybody that is collapse alert, is the honest answer. People certainly, this last year or two, people are talking about climate a bit more, but nobody collapse alert. Nobody's on the same page. I see nobody freaking out, nobody trying to grow more food, nobody doing any of those telltale signs that you've just realised things are bad. You know, in an ideal world, I would grow enough to share when things get bad, but this isn't the solution. There's no running away from it. It's just good medicine for me.
Do you work many hours every day?
Depends what you call work, really. In order to survive in an environment like this, where work is thin on the ground, I turn my hand to many things. I have 15 years as a graphic designer behind me. I have 10 years as a builder behind me, and 8 years as a farmer, let's say. Yeah, maybe not farmer. So I use all of those at the moment. I manage a few websites for people. I do building work. I do some gardening work. And I also have this place to run with my dear wife. So I would say, weather permitting, if it's not raining, we work every day. 7 days a week is a working day. It's not necessarily 9 to 5. You work a little bit with the weather and the seasons and what other demands on your time you need to satisfy. But it doesn't feel like work anymore, David. To me, it's
how much of your personal needs do you generate from the farm?
Nowhere near enough. I wouldn't know it's to say. More so in summer, the percentage goes up because things. Let's leave this summer to one side because everything suffered and everybody suffered this year. Maybe let's just pick a figure out the air and say maybe we're at 20%. That would be optimistic, I guess, but 20%. We have a long way to go.
And this summer, tell me more about the troubles of this summer in particular, please.
This summer, summer arrived about a month early. So all the plants that you'd nurtured and transplanted into the ground didn't have a chance to get their roots in and suffered heat stress. Plants didn't flower. Some didn't grow. Those that did flower weren't pollinated. It depends on the plant, a whole different host of reasons. But half of the garden literally did nothing. The plants just stuck there in stasis, like they were made of plastic. Did absolutely nothing. They were irrigated daily. We've put irrigation systems in everywhere. And it was just too dry, too hot. Even nighttime temperatures, which were problems, the plants didn't get that break. And we know, you might have seen today on my Facebook feed that we have the famous Asian stink bug moving their way down, which decimated the tomato crop in the latter half of summer.
Have you learned that the people around you are suffering similarly from these kind of problems?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody. It's the same conversation with anybody that's got a vegetable garden. Really, I mean, you needn't have the conversation. You all understand. So, in some respects, I wish other people were doing better, but it's a little nugget of comfort that you're not doing something terribly wrong. Also, but it's nationwide. I'm a member of a few Facebook groups for gardening in Italy, the whole of Italy, and it's from the toe of the boot up to the top of the thigh. And not only.
So your journey of farming and making a home for yourself on the land within the community of life has played out, I know from speaking to you otherwise, it's played out next to or within or as part of your own personal and spiritual evolution.
Yes.
Could you, as we come toward the end, could you talk about how you feel you've evolved and changed during your time in Italy?
Save the easy ones till last.
Yeah.
Have I evolved and changed? I mean, going back to the switch from anthropocentric to ecocentric has been a large part of my transformation. Helped in no small part by living in 12 acres of nature and having to work with nature in order to do what we're trying to do here. So those two happened very much together. One helped the other. And that's why I say it's good medicine here. I also get reasons for gratitude daily. Gratitude I always understood intellectually as a concept, but it never came to me prior to collapse. Never came to me until I fully considered my own demise, I guess. And then I found it started coming to me naturally. And often it was the birds or the bees or the trees or the breeze or just this environment that I live in that brings me this gratitude. And I wish I'd have learned that earlier. And I'm glad I found it now rather than never. I'm oh so thankful that I'm here now. That I am where I am when I came to collapse awareness. I shudder at the thought of having to have done this journey back on the treadmill in the rat race in England. My transformation continues. I'm very much like you, David, and we've had this conversation. Modern medicine is very important to us. So I can think about collapse and how that may unfold as much as I like. But the reality is, if I can't get some basic medicines, it's quite quickly over for me. So I don't waste too much time thinking about how much food I might be able to grow and how this may play out. I'm very much focused in today, maybe tomorrow. And that naturally has led me to some Buddhist readings while I don't practice it very much, while I don't meditate very much. My days are generally wonderful, joyful. And for that, I've said to numerous people before, I would never put collapse awareness back into a box. It's too precious for me. It's been a bumpy journey, but now the transformation I've gone through, it's been phenomenal. I would never go back.
Thank you for that. Well, very last, in the conventional civilized way, I'll ask you, what's coming up for you, Stuart? What are you what's next on the, I don't know, schedule, agenda?
Next on the schedule, yeah, it's a timely question because we've just finished summer, that's the right word. So now we've got 6 months of nice weather, sensible temperatures to do projects, to go ahead, to move forwards before the firefighting comes in, kind of late spring, summer, where it's just about trying to stay on top of things. So going back to the log terraces, we have another one of those to rebuild before we finish the lower part of the garden. And we have some more IBC tanks to cut, fill, and start growing. I'm also trying to build a clay pot irrigation system to try and reduce water consumption for next year. That's something to start testing and implementing in the springtime. Never short of projects. And
Fantastic.
also continuing my journey, my inner journey, David, my inner work. That's as important as anything else to me.
Well, I wish you well, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me today. We run into each other on the Deep Adaptation Facebook group now and again, and people can find you there as a moderator. Do you have any final word you'd like to say?
Any final word I'd like to say? My nugget of collapse awareness being a gift given time would have been a nugget for me. It's helped with my depression, perversely. And it just needs exploring with open honesty. And I wish more people would come to that awareness, despite me feeling like I'm not up to the job of doing that myself. So yes, I look forward to maybe more of these discussions with more people. It's finding your tribe, albeit online, is nourishing, David, and I thank whoever and whomever for these opportunities.
Great. And I thank you for your contribution to the discussion that we're starting to have on this topic.
Thanks for inviting me to the club. I feel very honored.
So glad to see you. I'm David Baum in Seattle. This is Collapse Club. That was Stuart Smith from Tuscany, Italy, on his 12-acre farm there within the community of life. Until we meet again, farewell.
Okay, David.
Bye.